Dear colleagues, let us talk about urbanization and its negative impacts on climate change. Let me introduce my colleague Tetiana TKACHENKO, Doctor Habilitatus, Professor, Head of the Department of Environmental Protection Technologies and Labor Safety in Kyiv National University of Construction and Architecture. She is a well-known specialist in green construction, green structures, climate change, sponge city concept, urban water resilience, etc. History of urbanization. The Slavic word gorod, town, is found in the chronicles of the time of Kyiv Rus and originated from the word to fence or to protect. A town, gorod, is a fortified area with a fence. At first, people built a fence from predatory animals, then from enemies. In any case, people gathered behind the fenced area to avoid danger. They settled there, and gradually the rural settlement grew into a city. Historically, three stages of urbanization have been distinguished. The first stage from the moment of the first settlement until the 18th century. The second stage, the end of the 18th, beginning of the 20th century. The third stage, metropolization, the beginning of the 20th century and up to the present. Most ancient cities were quite environmentally friendly, in particular due to limited production volume, lack of technologies and vehicles with emissions of hazardous substances, carbon release for heating, cooking, technology and farm animals within the amount sequestrated by plants without fossil fuel extraction. However, such overpopulated large cities as Babylon, Nineveh and Pompeii already have environmental problems and tried to solve them with green roofs and terraces. To date, excavations haven't confirmed but haven't refuted the existence of the hanging gardens in Babylon. However, in Nineveh and Pompeii, their remains were discovered. The end of 18th century marked the beginning for the growth in the size and number of cities, towns, and the acceleration of the development of science and technology. The widespread use of stone construction, capital fortification, transport, etc. Nevertheless, they remained relatively environmentally friendly. At this time, people wanted to make their life easier and tried to involve the energy of fire. In 1799, steam power was first successfully used in North Yorkshire for a threshing machine. In 1804, Richard Trevithick built the first steam locomotive, and in 1829, George Stephenson built the rocket, a steam locomotive which would become the prototype for all subsequent developments and would pollute the environment until the 1960s. In 1863, Pierre-Emile Martin built the first steel marking furnace called an open hearth furnace. Thus, cities became increasingly burdensome to the development. Since the beginning of the 20th century, metropolization has begun. With the Industrial Revolution, more and more people are living in countryside and moving to cities to meet the huge demand for labor, engineering and management personnel. Industry is consuming fossil fuels indiscriminately, emitting harmful substances and greenhouse gases. Cities are growing in wide and high. Some cities, such as Hong Kong, have buildings 72 stories high, with the formation of traffic jams of people, not cars, on pedestrian pavements. And current state of urbanization. With further urbanization, there is a transition from individual cities to urban agglomerations, spatially and functionally unified groups of urban-type settlement that create a common natural and social-economical environment. In the EU, it's customary to consider an urbanized territory as one where the population density exceeds 1,500 inhabitants per square kilometer. Territories with a population density of 300 to 1,500 inhabitants per square kilometer, are referred to as so-called urban clusters. Agglomerations are divided into two types: conurbation, a polycentric type agglomeration that unites several more or less equal cities and large urban areas that, due to population growth and physical expansion, merge into one continuous urban industrially developed area. Metropolis, a large city formed as a result of the merger of several urban agglomerations, megapolises, compared to conurbation, characterize a qualitatively different spatial level of development of the territory. They occupy huge areas, are not a territory of continuous development, usually from 1 per 5 to 1 per 4 of their territory is occupied by urban land use. Natural landscapes, agricultural area, and recreational zones present in a megapolis are fragmented by urban land use and cannot be preserved in the long term. For many developed countries in Europe and North America, the level of urbanization has reached 75–80%. In some developed countries, such as Switzerland or Austria, the level of urbanization is much lower, close to that of Ukraine, and has remained so for many years. In contrast, in the oil-rich countries of the Middle East, 90–95% of the population lives in cities, and the countries of Latin America and Island Asia are urbanizing at a rapid pace. Urbanization in Europe and developing countries is fundamentally different. The growth of the urban population in countries such as Bangladesh or Indonesia often does not lead to change in the quality of life of the urban population, which was formed from the rural population. There are no basic services and housing for the city. Consequences of urbanization are different. Urbanization isn't only an evil. Urbanization has positive consequences for economics and social development, and to some extent for the environment. GDP growth, preservation of cultural and historical heritage, the possibility of effective management of energy production and consumption through intelligent centralization of energy supply, and the creation of smart grids. Educational functions of the development of science and technology, functions of medical development, improving management and communication efficiency, unification of transport flows and efficient logistics, providing jobs, improving the standard of living and comfort, more efficient waste and sewage management, better notification of the population in the event of disasters or military operations. However, cities consume 75% of the world's natural resources and contribute 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The role of cities is growing exponentially, with the consequences of their impact on climate change. The negative consequences are global, chemical and thermal pollution of the atmosphere, which leads to climate change, pollution of aquatic ecosystems, soil pollution, destruction of forests, biodiversity loss, increasing consumption of exhaustible energy resources, man-made disasters, increased natural disasters, increasing ozone holes, and local pollution of water, soil and air environments in cities, increasing waste volume, thermal noise, vibrations and radiation pollution, spread of diseases and epidemics, deterioration of psycho-emotional state, energy poverty, dependence on collective engineering systems, natural and man-made accidents, destruction of green spaces and impoverishment of the landscape, facilitated destruction of many concentrated objects during military operations, significant victims among concentrated civilians as a result of strikes, especially by certain type of projectiles, nuclear cluster, phosphorus, chemical and biological weapons, or terrorist acts. The predominance of positive and negative effects depends solely on the type of society in relation to consumption. Consumer society corresponds to the slogan, "A person is a human as he/she can consume." At the beginning of capitalist relations, the level of consumption, quality of clothing, housing, watches, etc., gave an understanding of how much a person is able to pay. This has grown into limitless consumption, which is incorrect to call predatory. Predators consume so much to be well fed. The formation of excessive waste and emissions and the depletion of available resources. Such a society nullifies the value of a person and makes him unable to protect the future needs in a safe environment, even of his children, and in the worst case, his own future needs. A sustainable society doesn't make human values dependent on external attributes and conditions. The main principle is to ensure the interest of future generation, to create conditions for further continuous development. This form of society requires a high level of upbringing, education, and awareness. Let us conclude. Urbanization has gone through 3 historical stages of development, each corresponding to the level of development of technologies and need at that time. Even in the first stage, when cities were mostly environmentally friendly, people in some large cities experienced certain problems. The second stage of urbanization coincided with the beginning of the development of industrial technologies and energy machines. The third stage corresponds to the rapid development of technologies and unbridled consumerism, which led to overcoming of the environment's ability to adapt to thermal pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. As a result, irreversible climate change began. Urbanization causes a number of positive and negative impacts, the prevalence of which depend on the attitude of society to consumption and the use of resources. Thank you for your attention.